Here's the one mental model that changes how you see this entire strategy. The DPMCC, the dynamic poor man's covered call. And getting it wrong is the fastest way to blow up a retirement account. Picture a commercial fishing operation. Your long-dated leap call is the boat. The weekly call you sell against it is the net you cast. The net brings in your income, but only as long as the boat stays afloat. Lose the boat, and there's nothing left to cast the net from. So every decision in this system answers one question before any other. Does this protect the boat? Today, I'll show you how to think like the owner of that boat, because that mindset, more than any single trade, is what keeps retirement income coming year after year. Quick note before we start. Everything in this video is educational only. It is not financial advice. Options involve substantial risk. Please talk to a licensed professional before you make any investment decisions. At the end of the last video, I promised we'd go under the hood on the boat, the foundation of the whole machine. This is that video. By now you know the two-engine machine of the DPMCC. Engine 1 is your leap call, the long-dated, deep-in-the-money option that behaves almost like owning 100 shares. That's the boat. Engine 2 is the weekly call you sell against it. And here's a sharpening I want you to carry from here on. The premium from that call is not your income. It's extrinsic value that finances a fixed weekly paycheck. The decay of that extrinsic value is the source. The paycheck is the draw you set. Hold that distinction, because the strategy lives or dies on protecting the engine that actually carries you, the boat. Let's be precise about the boat. Your leap call is a deep-in-the-money call, 12 to 24 months to expiration with a delta up around 80, meaning it gains and loses almost dollar for dollar with SPY, for roughly a quarter of the capital of owning the shares outright. That's your foundation. Everything else in the strategy stands on it. If the boat is still seaworthy next quarter and next year, you keep generating income. If it isn't, the income doesn't shrink, it stops. That asymmetry is the entire reason the boat comes first. The net, the short call, has two jobs. First, the extrinsic value it throws off each week finances your paycheck, the fixed draw you live on. Second, the boat absorbs the difference between that premium and your draw in both directions. In a strong week, the surplus above your draw builds equity in the boat, lowering your cost basis and adding a cushion for the next downturn. In a weak week, when the premium falls short or even turns negative because SPY ran past your short strike, the difference comes back out of the boat, which by then has usually gained enough in value to cover it. That two-way balance is the seesaw, and we give it a whole video of its own later. For now, hold the idea. The net feeds you first, and the boat quietly absorbs the rest, up or down. Here's where most covered call traders go wrong, and it jeopardizes the whole boat. The mistake isn't sending at the money calls for a fat premium. In a neutral market, that's exactly the right strike. The mistake is drawing all of that premium as income, week after week, instead of pacing the draw. When you take every dollar the net brings in, you starve the boat. It never builds the cushion that carries you through a downturn. Foundation first means the opposite. You draw your income at a set, modest rate and route the surplus back into the boat. We'll put the exact rate on it in the next video. And if that pace ever feels too conservative, the boat has room. You can occasionally draw from the leap call's own gains. The point is that the draw is deliberate, not whatever the market happened to hand you this week. And for a retiree, this isn't a stylistic preference, it's structural. A young trader who blows up an account has decades of earned income to rebuild it. A retiree drawing down a fixed pool of savings does not. You cannot replace the boat. That single fact is why capital preservation sits at the center of everything in this system. For a young trader, foundation first is good discipline. For you, it's the difference between an income strategy that lasts 30 years and one that ends in a single bad month. Protecting the boat begins before you ever cast a net, and it starts even before timing with the boat itself. This whole strategy only works on a vessel built to rise over the long run, a broad, upward trending market index. Run it on something that grinds sideways or sinks for years, and no entry timing can save you. Which vehicles qualify is its own video. The principle here is that a seaworthy boat is the right kind of underlying to begin with. Then comes the launch. We don't start a new campaign into a falling market, or when SPY is stretched far above its trend. That's putting to sea in a storm. We wait for the trend to reassert itself, for the chart to turn back up, before we commit the boat. There is a dedicated video later on the exact entry signals we use, but the principle belongs here. The cheapest way to protect the boat is to launch the right vessel, and only in fair weather. So what actually threatens the boat once you're on the water? The first threat is assignment. If the call you sold moves in the money or even sits right at the money, it can be assigned. Two situations trigger it. 1. Near expiration, once its extrinsic value is almost gone, the call can be exercised against you. 2. The dividend. SPY pays 4 times a year, and the day before it goes ex-dividend, a short call with little extrinsic value left becomes a candidate for early assignment, because the buyer wants that payout. Now, here's what assignment actually does, and it's less scary than it sounds. It doesn't put shares on your books. It makes you short 100 shares you don't own. But you still hold the leap call, which moves almost in lockstep with those shares. So you simply buy 100 shares to close the short, at little net profit or loss. So assignment is manageable, but you need a plan for it. The cleaner path is to avoid it altogether. You roll, buy the short call back, and reopen it further out, before assignment can happen. We'll cover the exact rolling mechanics in their own video. The second threat is a sharp, fast decline in SPY. Remember, the boat is leveraged, and that cuts both ways, hard. At around 80 delta, the leap call already falls almost as fast as 100 shares. But you control that exposure for roughly a quarter of the cash. So on the capital you actually put up, it's a far bigger percentage hit. And after an uptrend, when the call has moved deeper in the money and its delta has climbed toward 100, it falls faster still, behaving like well more than 100 shares relative to what you invested. The boat doesn't sink from an ordinary pullback, but a severe, rapid decline is exactly when an undisciplined trader loses it. So the defensive toolkit we'll walk through next exists for one purpose: to make sure the boat survives the worst weeks, not just the calm ones. First defense: match the net to the weather. In a calm or rising market, we sell further out of the money and let the boat ride the trend. When the market turns down, we sell the call deeper in the money. That heavier premium behaves like a partial hedge, cushioning the boat on the way down while still generating income. The net isn't only there to collect rent. In a storm, it helps keep the boat afloat. We have full videos on reading the regime and choosing the strike. The takeaway here is that your strike is a defensive lever, not just an income dial. Second defense: a hard line you never negotiate. The rule: if the boat's value ever falls 25% below what you paid for it, you're out. No hoping, no averaging down, no just one more week. Why 25 and not 50? Recovery math. A 25% loss needs a 33% gain just to climb back to even. Painful, but survivable. Let it slide to 50% and now you have to double your money to break even. And a retiree living off that capital rarely has the years to do it. And notice the basis: 25% of the boat itself, not of some blended position that your weekly income has already partly drained. That's the clean line. A retiree's worst enemy isn't a small disciplined loss. It's the small loss they refuse to take that compounds into a catastrophic one. On a boat you launched in the right weather, you'll almost never touch this line, but it's the line that keeps a bad trade from ever becoming a fatal one. Third defense: don't put the whole ocean behind one boat. Because the leap call is leveraged, committing every dollar to it means one bad stretch can sink you with no reserve to row or defend. The rule of thumb: deploy at most half your investable capital into these positions. The other half isn't idle. It sits in assets that don't fall when stocks do. Treasury bills and money market funds paying around 4%, with a portion in gold or other non-correlated holdings. That reserve earns while it waits, and it's the dry powder that lets you act when a downturn hands you a better entry. And here's what that discipline does for the hard stop we just set. If only half your capital is ever in these boats, that 25% line is at most a 12.5% dent in your whole portfolio. A bad trade, not a wrecked retirement. Exactly how many contracts that buys for your income goal is its own video. The rule here is simple. Never stake the boat you can't replace, and keep your reserve in calmer waters. Put it together, and it stops being poetry and becomes a checklist. A boat launched in fair weather means the right vehicle, a long-term uptrending index, started only in a confirmed uptrend, never into a downturn or an overextended market. A net cast at the right depth means regime-dependent short call strikes, further out when it's calm, deeper in when it's falling. A hard stop means a defined line, 25% of the boat's value, that you won't cross, set to protect your retirement savings. And a reserve in the bank means dry powder, ready to put a fresh boat in the water near the end of a downturn. 4 concrete decisions. That's the whole discipline. So the leap call is the boat, the short call is the net, and foundation first means the boat comes first, every time. Protect it at entry, defend it from its 2 threats, and never overcommit it. But don't lose sight of why you're protecting it at all. A sound boat is one that keeps generating premium, week after week, to finance your weekly and monthly paycheck. For years, not weeks. That's the whole point of the discipline. Next time, we put a real number on the net, how much weekly income it actually generates, and how to think about that paycheck. If this way of seeing it helped, subscribe so you don't miss it. No hype, no shortcuts, just real numbers and honest risk.